Apologies, ladies and gents. I haven't memorised all my stuff as well as Jim has, so I'm going to be referring to the computer a bit. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just not as good as Jim. Right. Well, thank you for coming. It's great that so many of you are still here. Basically, I've called this presentation Transitional Thinking 2.0 because it's a slight reworking of a presentation I already gave called Transitional Thinking, because I didn't have much time to write a completely different one, and I actually wanted to update this talk a little to include some fresh material, because I felt I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't. So, as Jim has already outlined, we, the Zeitgeist Movement, recognise that the problems, what the problems are.
You were backwards then.
Yeah, I'm teasing you. What the problems are, and it's with that knowledge that has inspired the application of this train of thought. We've covered part of what could be termed the what, the why, and part of the how. That being what the problems and the proposed solutions are, why the train of thought is advocated, and now with the presentation I hope to shed some light on the beginnings of the how. I did think also about including another section detailing the who, however a certain rock band maybe, well, maybe later. My intention with this presentation is to plant some seeds, as it were, in your minds in regards to our current values, methods and behaviours, and how they correlate to the safety, security, happiness and freedom of life on the planet as a whole. As I'm sure a great number of you will know, when communicating about a resource-based economic model, the most frequent and most persistent question we receive is, how do we get from here to there? And it is, of course, a very important question. It is my hope here today to add another string to your bow, as it were, to add another, so you can each start your own journey along that path and help others along their own. Now, it's not the scope of this presentation to give you some blueprint or set of plans for a transition from here to a sustainable world. True change is never achieved that way. Instead, it's achieved first through our values and how those values affect ourselves and those around us. I'm in the process of creating a presentation for this year's ZDay event in March that I've entitled Transitional Doing, which details a series of options, collaborations and ideas for the transition. However, any architect will tell you that it doesn't matter how good a house you build. If you don't have a good set of foundations already in place, then your building will suffer. It is my hope to present some insights into those foundations for our values. Documentary filmmaker and Hyrosonic frontman Ben Stewart once said, "Trillions of cells make up a single organism called the human body, and billions of human bodies help make up the organism we call Earth." We should keep this in mind at all times, considering our interconnectedness or symbiosis with everything around us. The very atoms that make up our bodies are also present in the furthest stars in this galaxy. As such, we should consider ourselves as both a macrocosm and a microcosm of the universe itself, for we are within it, and it is within us. This realization is, as you may find, actually diametrically opposed to our established views, beliefs and thought patterns. We're conditioned to consider ourselves as separate from each other and nature. This mentality serves to do just that, and this planet which helps sustain our lives is neglected. If we expect to survive as a species, let alone build any good life for ourselves, this conditioning has to be reversed. We as Earth are one large family. It's about time we started behaving like it. Certain cultures, which we tend to call primitive, did not abuse, exploit and destroy their natural environment, unlike modern so-called civilization. Instead, they lived in harmony with it. They took what they needed and no more, while giving back at the same time, taking every care not to cause negative retroactions. They did this because of one main understanding. If they protected and preserved nature, nature would continue protect and preserve them. By the end of this presentation, it is my hope to demonstrate that while we pride ourselves on what we can do and what we are, mainly through our use of science and technology, we are actually becoming more and more, as a result of our values, the real primitive culture. And through this demonstration, provide an interactive exploration of what is right on the course of us achieving the ability to call ourselves civilized. Ever since I joined the movement, I've found that presenting people with this train of thought has made a lot of people feel like this gentleman here. Obviously pointed towards that direction and willing to move forward to a certain extent. However, the bridge is incomplete and as a result are stuck where they are, never to cross over. So as a result, I began to think of certain elements of our culture and our values that really stuck out as corrosive, detrimental, hypocritical, obsolete, inhibitive, or all of the above, and group all of these together with a common goal of remedying these social and value-orientated ills. This resolution, I'm hoping, can at least hint towards how we can each construct the gaps in all of our own bridges. Right now I'm going to quickly run down a series of the many examples of these value distortions. We frequently conduct our received communications with what I like to call faith-based thinking, meaning that we take information in without even questioning its validity, asking for credible sources or considering the possible intentions of the information's communicator. This results, as you can imagine, with dysfunctional and unsubstantiated counter-communications. We have pop music, which is here merely to make money over and again, in a disposable fashion, keeping society only thinking within a narrow band of sex, money, image, and relationship troubles. And we wonder why our mainstream culture has been mentally tunnel-visioned. We have the celebrity cult of personality mentality, where famous people are deified merely for being in the spotlight. Just for those of you who can't read. Look, it's Paris Hilton. She's famous. What does she do?
How true.
I've just told you. This, as you can imagine, causes ordinary people like me or you to feel inadequate by comparison. There used to be a time when people were famous for being talented, virtuous, highly achieving, or the like. Now, people are being treated as though they are those things, merely for being famous. We have programs such as this.
Jeremy Vile Show.
Yep. Which now almost exclusively provides a platform for masses of undereducated, disenfranchised, and unfortunately downtrodden people to air their dirty laundry and solve personal discrepancies on national television or being shouted at by a self-important host. It's surprising how addictive these programs can be. However, the target demographic are completely unaware that they're actually engaging in an exercise to make you despise and judge other human beings in a very superficial manner. We have perpetual advertising and marketing hitting us at all angles, forcing us into submission of mainstream materialism and superficial wants. Not only does this delude us into thinking that the purchasing of these products will make us happy, but it also creates a division method that is used to cause people to believe that they're less than what they actually are, purely because they may or may not own a particular product. Another use of this advertising is to control society by means of filling their heads and stomachs with unhealthy garbage. This not only ensures society will be gradually stupefied, but it also ensures their addiction to said products, all the while being distracted from addressing the important things in life. You know, in the times of the Roman Empire, remember they had what was known as bread and circuses? Now we have a similar thing. Junk food and reality TV. We have the mainstream media pumping incentives for fear and separation into our minds 24/7. False flag terror attacks, outbreaks of spurious diseases and cultural violence are created for the very purpose of keeping you scared of anything and everything. God forbid if we, the human race, would live our lives without fear of being blown to bits by an Islamic terrorist, catching a fatal virus, or getting mugged and stabbed by a delinquent wearing a hoodie. We might actually want to grow and learn, and hence, I don't know, progress as a species. It's just a thought. We have politicians in charge when it's patently obvious they haven't the first clue about how to actually make real changes. That's besides the fact that they have no interest in change, as Jim said earlier. Regardless of this fact, because their dealings and associated issues have been branded as political, they are held up as the experts on how to manage things, while the rest of us would feel that we're out of our depth, right? We support and perpetuate blind submission to perceived authority, whether it is the coercive actions of agents within the so-called criminal justice system, or parents or teachers or carers, even when it comes to individuals wearing a suit, the magic uniform of authority.
I recognise him.
That's me wearing a costume for a social experiment to see who would actually pay attention to me on a megaphone just because I'm wearing a suit.
How did it go?
That keeps paying attention.
Quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even down to the pieces of paper we get pushed through our letterboxes, we've been groomed into thinking that we are governed by unthinking and unquestioning obligation. This enables slavery in all its forms to flourish right in our faces and in our hearts, and we don't collectively resist it. We deal with criminals by way of a form of violence known as punishment. Whether we murder them by electrocuting them or using deadly drugs, or whether we incarcerate them, forcing them to associate with violent prison people for years on end, we tend to avoid addressing the root cause of why any crime is committed, and not surprisingly, we exacerbate and perpetuate the entire problem. We suffer a fear of technology for what it could do to us and what it can do better than us. Mostly, we have Hollywood to thank for creating the fallacy that artificial intelligence will be inherently malevolent, and as such we feel fearful of technology on the whole. This is also due to the exponential growth and development of technology, which threatens the cohesion of the human labour force, as Jim alluded to earlier, leaving us obsolete as workers. We have incorporated into our intimate relationships the concept of private property, resulting in statements of property such as my wife or my husband. This obviously has its roots in religion and scarcity. However, we don't necessarily live in that kind of world anymore. However, since these values are perpetuated, we are conditioned to feel as though our spouses are our personal property. Another word for that is called slavery.
You just broke down one slave system.
Similar to our ineffective outgoing communications, we also suffer an inefficiency of received communications. For example, we choose to be offended whenever we encounter information that calls into question what we hold dear. Now this serves as a multiple purpose, from derailing the topic at hand to shooting the messenger, as it were. This is because we've been groomed into holding static information, and in fact incorporating it into our very identity. And when proven wrong, we take offence, because when that information incorporated into our identity is proven wrong, apparently we are proven wrong. We suffer as a result of our established conditioning a false dichotomy where we consider communism, also seemingly synonymous.
I'm sorry, the baby's not going to do.
That's fine. That's alright.
Thanks for the cake.
Yeah, probably.
Oh yeah, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
cake.
Take care now. So we consider communism, also seemingly synonymous with Marxism, Stalinism, Leninism, socialism and fascism, as the only alternative to capitalism. This is at least understandable, considering that no other alternatives are even talked about by our media. However, whenever someone does come along with an alternative to the monetary system, they must, in a lot of cases, answer the question, are you a communist? We have individuals such as these, instead of being widely embraced and their example being widely followed, they instead are ridiculed, denounced, incarcerated, tortured, and even outright murdered.
Do you know what? Most people wouldn't be able to tell you who 3 at least of them are.
I've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
I've got
3.
Tell you what, just as a little exercise, who can name all of these individuals? I know you.
I can Nikola Tesla, Aaron.
Wait, don't give the game away yet. It's an interesting game.
Okay, so top left is...
Pardon?
Top left is...
I know who it is, but do you want me to answer? Or okay, Galileo.
Yeah, it is.
Galileo.
Middle.
Centre top.
Centre top, Andy. Right, this is an interesting one. Nikola Tesla.
Oh.
He was
a genius.
the greatest scientist, in my opinion, that's ever walked the face of this planet.
And he was funded by J.P. Morgan, one of the banking elite, who then realised what his technologies would do for all human beings.
Small energy going.
Funding was cut.
Funding was cut. All his work was damaged.
And he died alone at 80 years old, broke in a New York hotel apartment.
And apparently had an IQ of somewhere in the region of 256. Hello, Neil.
So I got locked in the next I was stuck an hour and stuck for an hour in the between parties. They started to question me when I was there.
The guy bottom left is Martin Luther King. What about the middle? Bottom.
This is an interesting one. The bottom middle. Can anyone name the gentleman at the bottom middle?
Not the Venezuelan.
Is that Hugo
No.
No.
Do you want a clue?
I was still saying manage Liverpool.
It's a scientist, a doctor. His name's Brzezinski.
He's the one who's covering the cancer cures, and he really gets denigrated.
It's not cancer cure, but it is a far more effective way of treating cancer that he has, which is unbelievably. Even though the FDA have taken him to court and the highest court in the American land 17 times, and they've not pinned one thing on him. You know why? Because he's actually curing people with cancer, but with an anti-fascons. You know.
And obviously,
we all know.
RSS.
Do you know what? He's just been found dead.
Yeah, commit suicide, they say.
Oh yeah.
What was he noted for? I think the only thing that can be said with certainty is that he is dead.
Script. It's
and
internet language to news groups. So Wikipedia, WikiLeaks.
And he speaks out very much against Obama's drone thing, but apparently
2 weeks ago found dead.
They were going to. They charged him with something that he would have a 30-year jail sentence. One story.
And he was like 24.
And then they sort of like plea bargained it down to 6 months. And they say that it was suicide, but
that's not the word on 4chan.
Okay, all that I've just been
Sorry,
stuff and change the water. We people here do the whole positive stuff, and this is the transition.
We've generated this strange value in our culture around apathy, being considered as cool. Very much like in school, the popular kids picked on the smart kids. Apparently it's not cool to care about things that are going on in the world. It shows up how everyone else doesn't care as much or can't understand as much. So let's make it a bad thing to care and a cool and in fact good thing not to care, right? And we wonder why we still haven't solved the problems in society. Tell you what, let's get you involved in all this, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's delve into a few of these in more detail and see what we can find. Starting with this one. What's known as techno-fear. The question on this window reads, when you see automation making human labour redundant, should you feel negatively about this? Who would answer yes?
I never read those, I always click the one that's highlighted.
Let me make a point about that. If you become as involved in what's behind this, then someone like me would say no. But if I hadn't been aware of what I might
say yes.
Yeah,
it depends how you perspective you're looking at it.
I'm busting
And also the yes is highlighted, as you might see on. Do you know what I mean?
All the yeses are highlighted.
Oh yeah, but I just find that
I think the argument stands that most people would click yes.
Yeah, so you
feel
pressure
to
to
the job market going down, no money, and everything burns. So
well, a reaction of negativity is understandable, even condonable to a point, because that machine has just taken your job, and hence your purchasing power, which means your ability to monetarily provide for yourself and your family. However, is that really the case? Is it empirical that machine automation ruins our lives? Or is it something else? Is it maybe only because we have a system fueled by human labour, and hence the perpetuation of and circulation of currency? Have we made the mistake of allowing technology to evolve to the point of eradicating the need for a human labour force, and hence the end of our lives as we know it? Or have we made the mistake of creating a system that is now made obsolete by our application of technology? You see, when we automate, we raise efficiency, productivity, speed and accuracy. Isn't that what we're supposed to be heading towards anyway? Isn't that what we developed technology for in the first place? So it follows that we have to let go of certain things in order to move on to that next level. So we realise that capitalism is a dead weight. It's holding us back. I'm sorry, you have to let it go. Next question. Is the use of politics and hence politicians the optimal method for solving problems?
Oh, yeah.
Who would answer yes?
Most people, I think, would be safe to say probably.
Yeah.
I'd say no.
I think there's a difference between politics and politicians.
Yeah.
Because politicians are PR men for the corporation.
Oh, I don't know. I think even the political system has its problems. I really do. The whole system, as well as the politicians.
You can be politically minded without being.
Well, I'll tell you
I'll
tell you what. One thing we should bring up in the Q&A is what is the difference between politics and politicians. That's one thing we should pursue in the Q&A.
In any system, somebody's got to make decisions. So,
well, we should think
that's a
about.
good question. Can you? That's a very commonly asked question of who makes the decisions, and that does need to be addressed.
That's also where technology can come in, because the politicians should come up with the ideas. The technology exists so that everyone could vote on those ideas.
Well, we should think about the politicians' true ability.
For every question in Parliament,
I agree with what you're saying.
Of truly solving problems at their roots, or is their only weapon the patchwork method? Let's take an example of an ant infestation in your kitchen. Should we spend the rest of our lives utilising the patchwork solution of stomping on them and setting traps, or laws? Or should we utilise the technical solution of removing the spoiled food behind your fridge, which is causing the infestation in the first place? Now you see, is a politician capable of providing that technical solution per se? Of course not. They come from financial and legal backgrounds. They have no technical knowledge. Politics is a short-term thing. No politician has the incentive, let alone the opportunity, to care about how things will be in, say, 6 years' time, because there is no guarantee that they will be in a position of power by that time to have any responsibility for it. Next question. When someone makes an extraordinary claim, should you believe them? Who answered yes?
I'd say yeah.
This is giving me much more fun. It can become a yes later because you need to get facts. And
I don't know. Adolf made quite a few, didn't he?
This is one that can kind of be a yes and no.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
the middle.
Of course, as some of you will be aware, the phrase extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Like, for example, if I told you that I had a packet of chewing gum in my pocket, right, there's no reason that such a claim would be unrealistic to believe. Now, I could very well have a packet in there. However, how about if I told you that I had a pink fire-breathing dragon in my sock drawer?
Whatever you're into, Adam, you know.
I'm going to
I think I'd have to provide some evidence, don't you?
Yeah, you would.
You see, there's a compulsion to be lazy in our thinking and start to take things on faith, because it's more effort to check your sources or ask someone for their sources.
Go left.
Correct. Yes.
Bank left.
Why do you have to use the word bank?
Or ask someone for their sources and check them out, or you just believe them. However, when it comes to things of importance, that's when we need to be applying the principle of burden of proof, where we ask people, what is your evidence? When we don't ask for this evidence on important or emotionally charged issues, then all manner of counterclaims and irrational behaviour can be enacted. I mean, how much of the whole he said, she said crap can be negated when we don't take things on faith? I heard that Justin cheated on his girlfriend. Really? Who did you hear this from?
And have you got nothing better to worry about anyway?
Evidence can be constructed by anybody.
Chat amongst yourself while I'm having technical difficulties.
Go left.
And I'm going to do left, I would say right in the middle.
What was it? There's lies, damn lies and statistics.
Your job, Adam.
Damn lies and statistics.
I'm already on the mouse has disappeared!
That's because you clicked
yes.
Switched off.
There we go.
Oh no, you went back.
There you go, one up. If you just click,
The point is disappeared.
you just do that, you'll get through the
No,
slides.
I'm trying to scroll
Trying to
down.
scroll down.
Oh, yeah, sorry, because
No, it's all
I
right.
switched it off because of the...
Oh,
There you go. It's there.
Sorry.
James,
There you
there's a
go.
remote point on
It
the
was
work.
fine,
Hang on,
but
the next
there's
slide.
no way I could get out.
I need to
And they told me this when I was there to
How many-
something like this is British authority shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
What do you expect? I'm at the end of the
Yeah, it was actually
getting a bit colder, isn't it?
Where did you have to go?
Still all living.
I went to the wrong place. I went to the other side of the car park.
Right, sorry guys.
We can go. No, no, it's okay. No, I live in Eastbourne.
Yeah, please bring a friend.
Wrong place, and I got lost in there. Someone came and told me this is British authority. I'm supposed to be there.
Thanks for coming down.
Luckily, I had my unit card with me. I showed my unit card. I took my shoulder back.
Are you going?
Let me know. I've been here for an hour. I was not recording after that. Yeah, they did. They thought that I was there because Steve something.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Is that moving forward?
I was shocked at that. I'm here to find a place.
Sorry guys.
How much longer have we got going now? Because some people...
Not too much longer. It's coming to the end.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes
Just rattle through.
the buck stops there, because people either don't want to snitch on the infidelity that they've alluded to, or they generated the hearsay themselves. But if you get a source, check the source. If people knew that every time they were going to say something to stir up drama, they would be called on it and ask for their sources, I don't think many people would bother. Next question. Should we care about how many children we're having? Yeah, you're prophetic.
By caring about how many we're having now, we would then start caring about the ones that we've already got.
More and more nowadays, we're talking to people, more and more nowadays, when talking to people about an RBEM, we're starting to say that people are starting to say to us, oh, there's too many people, to infer that overpopulation is the problem. But at the same time, if you suggested to them that they should be more intelligent with their own procreation after they've just pushed out their fourth child, they go mad at you. I've noticed that there's a double standard when it comes to this issue. People are all for measures that make sure people have less kids, as long as they're not personally being told not to fill up the world with their sprogs. The thing is, they do have it partly right. The more children we have given birth to, the greater the strain on resources. People acknowledge this, but they've got that conditioning to want their own family. Dude, your laptop sucks.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
They've got that conditioning to want their own family and the mortgage and the family car and the joy-sucking jobs that fund it all. What I find frustrating about the situation is that we already have millions upon millions of children already here on this planet in need of basic life needs, but we ignore them because we didn't personally give birth to them, so they're not ours. Not my child equals not my problem. It is their problem. It is all our problem. Because if we concentrated on looking after those kids that were already here, instead of belligerently wanting our own families, then we wouldn't have that overpopulation problem fallacy to complain about to begin with. Now it's beeping at me. Okay.
No, only love. Love and understanding.
Love is all you need.
Yeah,
Someone misses this because they don't feel any support.
No, God, yeah, that's fine. I'll deal with it. This is all informal anyway, so. So the last question: is punishment an adequate method to deal with so-called crime? Do you think so?
No. No, I thought to reduce recidivism, mate. Not effective.
Mm-hmm. We need to look a little deeper at this issue. Is it even appropriate to separate individuals who commit crimes, ergo slamming them in cells? I would answer with a huge resounding no. The very act of incarceration is actually a form of violence, and it doesn't do anything for the rehabilitation of criminals, because what kind of people will you be associating with in prison? The same kinds of people who have been conditioned into aberrant behaviours. Seriously, we as a species really need to get over ourselves in respect of how we react towards and treat criminals. In particular,
not just criminals, everyone.
Well, people who are labelled as criminals.
Well,
especially even when it comes to individuals who have committed acts such as rape, murder and child molestation. Currently, the common and even accepted methodology, first off, is to label them as sick, perverts, monsters, and many other names which are just as vicious. While this is completely counterproductive and surprisingly divisive, I can understand the reaction. They feel so personally affronted, disgusted, and emotionally injured by the very hearing or reading of such an act, that they project the intended hatred, will for vengeance and hostility at anyone who committed the crime and anyone who doesn't feel exactly the same way they do. The point is that when we label these individuals with the hateful words that we do, we are conveniently overlooking what has actually caused this behaviour to manifest in them. Was Ed Gein born a serial murderer? No. He was made into one by years of physical, verbal and emotional abuse, not to mention the firebrand religious indoctrination at the hands of his mother. We need to move from punishment to positive reinforcement. We need to be looking into what has caused this behaviour in the first place, not extracting our pound of flesh and perpetuating the whole problem. The reason so many commit crimes is down to how we learn and what we develop as a means to get what we need. In a world where we would have what we need, for example a resource-based economic model, what propensity is there for crime? What criminals need is the opposite to what we currently dish out to them. They need to be treated like human beings. Ultimately, they need what they were never given.
Until you train society, that's not going to happen though, is it?
Well, you need to be given love, just like all the rest of us.
Yeah, we can only train society by giving our neighbours and anybody that we don't, everybody we meet.
It's got to be collective, isn't it?
So in conclusion, as humanity, we've lost our way. We are less than what we could be. We see ourselves as we like to be, or how we want to be, but never how we need to be, for what we need to do, for where we need to go. We have gorged ourselves for far too long on the values of materialism, apathy and hostility. We are uncomfortable at looking a little deeper and seeing what lies at the bottom of everything. We're scared to look because we've created a fear of what we would probably find. However, what we're really doing is holding ourselves back from our true potential, which is nothing but positivity and creativity. You see, that's the thing. We are human beings, and like I say during my megaphone activism, you are all beautiful, unique, wonderful and creative human beings. However, on the downside of that, we are capable of anything given sufficient conditioning. However, that does not give us dominion over the lands and seas we live on.
Or a mouse.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, dude.
Suddenly, as I was reading it, it had already disappeared, and I'm like, soldier on.
The laptop from hell.
Yeah, I know. I knew I should have done it on mine. So this brings me back to the question I mentioned in the beginning. How do we get from here to there? Back when I was in secondary school, one of the English classrooms had pieces of paper on the walls with inspirational quotes on them. And one of them read, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." And this is absolutely true. So what is our first step, as it were? It is our change in values. It all starts right here, in yourself. You must change first because of that initial spark within you to move towards better values and behaviours. Or as Mahatma Gandhi said, we must be the change we want to see in the world. It all starts with you. And from there, instead of simply talking the talk, you start to walk the walk. Not only does this improve your own life and mind, but it really radiates to everyone around you and influences and inspires them to also seek the change within themselves. You see, this doesn't just imply being better people, but this also implies that by becoming the change, we are also becoming our own leaders. More mature as free-thinking and self-governing human beings that do not need to be governed or provided for by any other person who we are taught holds more authority than ourselves. We would truly become adults, because an adult guides themselves. A child is in need of protection and sustenance because they haven't grown to do that for themselves. Let us grow up. When it comes to the technology and the methods that we have, and thus the infrastructure we can build and the things we can do for a resource-based economic model, allow me to be blunt. These things are meaningless, irrelevant, useless, and in fact dangerous if applied with the incorrect values. You see, currently we are clinging onto obsolete draconian values while armed with nanotech weaponry the size of a marble that can obliterate all life on Earth. Do we currently hold the right mindset for the capabilities that we have right now? Of course not. So let's evolve up here and in here first. I'll end my presentation today with a quote from Chinmoy Kumar Goze. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Thank you very much.